Welcome. My name is Michelle Techler, and I am the Teen Services Librarian here at Cary Library. It's my dog, Arlo. We have a wonderful evenings panel event featuring 3 independent YA authors, Renee Dugan, Katharine Marie, and Brianne Wik. And we're really happy to have these writers join us tonight to talk about their work and to talk about the process they went through to get their novels published. I am particularly thrilled that tonight's moderator is going to be Lucy Gould. She is a Lexington resident and a sophomore at Arlington Catholic High School. Lucy is very active at Cary Library. I've known her for quite a while, and she is an important member of our Teen Library Leadership Council. And she is the driving force behind tonight's event. In the fall, she came to me with this idea, and I said, okay, Lucy, if you can get some authors to come and you can make it work, we'll do it. And she did the whole thing. She contacted the authors, she's come up with the questions, and she just made it happen. So I'm really proud of her and looking forward to the discussion that she leads. Our topic for the panel is of particular interest to Lucy. I know she loves their work. She's a big fan of all 3 authors, but she has also herself written her first novel, and she hopes to self-publish in the fall. And so with that, I will turn it over to you, Lucy.
Thank you, Michelle, so much for that wonderful introduction. To start, I just want to outline how this evening will go. I'm going to ask the authors to introduce their work with a short little summary for those of you who haven't read it or aren't familiar with it. And then I'm going to ask some questions, general and specific to their work. And then if you guys have any questions, put them in the chat. We might not get to them, but if we have time at the end, I would love to have some of your questions asked. So without further ado, here's the first question. So what is one reason you chose self-publishing over traditional publishing?
Well, one of the reasons that I chose self-publishing over traditional publishing was the freedom of it. I have a feeling we'll probably all say this. So I almost feel bad answering first with this, but there's, I honestly didn't even consider traditional publishing, and that might seem a little kind of crazy or whatever, but I'm a really independent person. I've been an entrepreneur for most of my life. It's one of those things where I wanted to be able to really choose what I did with my stories and with my books and with my brand. And I just went for it because of that freedom of it. So that's at least one of the reasons that encompasses like several different things right in there. But yeah, that's my answer.
I would say, following on the heels of that, you kind of took my answer, Brianne. That was a big one for me too. Just the ability to be in control of my brand and make a lot of those decisions. But I think also a big one for me was knowing that I was going to have start a family someday, and I have a day job that I absolutely love doing and have been working at since I was 15. And I really loved the idea of being in control of where I spent my time and how I spent my time. And so having just welcomed a baby this year, I had to take a bit of a step back from publishing, and being a self-published author allowed me to do that guilt-free. Whereas I think making big life changes and choices like that is a little bit harder. I've seen a lot of my traditional author friends and acquaintances struggle a little bit more with that. So getting into self-publishing there at the start, I really knew that it was going to be a huge part of how I made my life choices.
I pretty much agree with both of them. I wanted the freedom, but just to kind of focus in for me, when it came to my debut novels, I had some subjects in there that I was concerned would be censored in traditional publishing, and I wanted to make sure that I could tell the story the way I wanted to tell it. So that was a very focused reason as to why I wanted the freedom. But everything else they said, wanting to be able to control my own schedule, have my own brand, really just be able to write what I wanted to write. That's kind of one of the reasons that I chose self-publishing.
Great. Along the same lines, what is the #1 best and the #1 worst thing about self-publishing?
Oh man. Well, the best is probably kind of the same answer we just had, you know, of like that freedom part of it all. Um, so I'll jump right into the worst part. But I think for me, it's that when you are doing anything on your own, so like as an author, you know, an independent author, we're all running our own businesses. Like when we write a book, you know, this is still a business, we tell stories, but if we want to be able to like sell it, you know, and like have this be a thing, it's a business that we're doing. And you are the person in charge of literally everything. So you have to go learn it all. You have to figure it all out. You have to, you know, you're a one-woman show or whatever for us, at least because we're all women here. But depending on whatever, but you are the one doing it all. And I think that that's probably the worst part, even though I am really independent, you know, you need the people still to be able to learn from and whatnot and stuff. So that's why we have little groups like this. Like all of us actually know each other and we've all helped each other and supported each other, which has been huge for me as like a really positive thing for the self-publishing. And I would also say that that's the best thing to me. So the worst is having to do it all by yourself and kind of figure it all out. But the best is also that you can find amazing people like these other women right here with me to do this with and help support and love on, you know, and all of that stuff. So there we go. That's my answer.
Yeah, I definitely agree on those points. I think for me, you know, one of the best things is the ability to tell like the stories that I want to tell and that I feel led to tell, and to tell them the way that I need to, without kind of like what Katie was mentioning, you know, feeling of censorship that sometimes comes with traditional publishing. But the trade-off in that is that, you know, you write these stories, they're stories from your heart, and then it is up to you exactly how far they go, really. Like, you know, you have to market your book, you have to market yourself, you have to wear like a bajillion hats and really be at least somewhat of an expert in all of them in order to really get your book out there and get yourself out there. And it's a lot. It's a lot of, you know, business acumen, and and that's after you've gone through the toilsome process of actually writing the book. So you know, it's just things continue to stack up. So I think that's really the hardest part.
For me, one of the best parts has been some of the smaller things that I think people don't realize the authors in traditional publishing don't have as much control over as you think. Like, I love being able to work with a cover designer and being able to like make all the little changes and make all the decisions about that. I am right now working with a map designer, which is a new experience for me. I've never worked with a map designer and I'm having so much fun with it. So just these like little moments, and also being able to choose when you do all of your announcements and how you want to celebrate it. So making those smaller moments memorable. The worst part for me, I will agree with both of what Renee and Brianne said. And my answer, I don't think is exclusive to indie publishing. I think this is just authors and creatives in general, is imposter syndrome and self-doubt. It's really easy when you are in such a close-knit community like indie publishing to compare yourself to other people. And I know that that's something I do, and it does not help me in any way. But I think that's something that even traditional authors would probably relate to. It's not exclusive to indie, but it is something that I'd like to mention. It's really hard because when you find yourself in that place, it can really affect the creative process, and it can make it difficult to want to move forward. So you really have to learn to push through it. And I think that's something a lot of people can relate to.
Thank you. In my excitement to get to the questions, I completely forgot to give you guys that little self-promo moment. And since you guys talked a lot about the cons being like, you have to do all the marketing yourself, take a minute and a second to market your books to the audience.
That's like such a perfect segue though. I feel like you did that on purpose because like it just goes so naturally. Okay, well, I can say I'm Brianne Wik, and I have written and I'm currently writing the Iridescent series. I'm currently writing book 3 of that trilogy, which is also going to have little spin-off stories that I'm already starting. I'm really excited. But it is basically a Cinderella tale in which I dive a whole lot deeper into the trauma that Cinderella goes through. And I add in a bit more of the fun twists and turns of romance, of giving her an additional somebody to possibly love on, because I think that our Cinderella girl for all of these years has been dished, just one dude. And I think she needed more than one. So I wanted to do something a little bit different with that. But I just really love fairy tales. I love fantasy. I love romance, but I really wanted to bring into it the hardships too. And Cinderella for me was kind of the perfect place to get started with that. So that's a little bit about my series. I have my book right here so I can hold it up. You said marketing. So here you go. Boom, there it is. One Iridescent Night is the first of that trilogy. So there's my little pitch, right? I know, there you go. Renee, I'll hand it off to you.
Well, I am Renee Dugan. I am an author. I have one standalone novel published called The Chaos Circus, which is a young adult portal fantasy. And that was my debut that came out in 2019. And then I am currently in the process of publishing a 7-book epic high fantasy series called The Star Chaser Saga, which has really brought me, the vast majority of the friends that are on, these 3 ladies I met through publishing Star Chaser, and it has been just an absolute dream getting to write the story and publish it. I started it back in 2017, and it really became for me my own coming of age story in a way, even though I'm in my late 20s. Don't let anybody tell you that you have to come of age before you hit your 20s, because that's absolutely not true. So I have really poured a lot of my own personal struggles with anxiety and friendship breakdowns and splits in my own life and things like that into the pages of this series. And I'm 5 books in out of 7. So the last 2 are coming out this year. And then I've got lots of other stuff on the horizon, but right now I'm basically publishing the series of my heart. So that's me.
And I'm Kathryn Marie. I am the author of the Midnight Duology, which is a fantasy historical romance. It is about a young noble woman who also moonlights as a vigilante assassin at night. And it's kind of all about her discovering who she is and how she wants to continue her life and continue the passion and the drive that she has developed over the past couple of years of not only leading her title, but helping her community as best she can, even in a more questionable manner, but full of romance and royalty. And I had such a fun time writing it. They're sitting right there, and there's a little bit of fan art poking. I have to have that on my shelf. And I am currently working on my next series, which I have not announced the title yet, but I am currently calling it Project Hybrids, and it is a paranormal fantasy and romance trilogy. And that will hopefully be releasing the first book in the fall of this year.
Yes, I just needed to do that. I got to read Katharine's, just so everybody knows, like right in the very beginning. I think Renee, you also read it, right? You guys, I'm obsessed. I'm just gonna throw in that quick little marketing thing for Katharine right now because it's so freaking good. I loved it.
That was amazing. I'm just so excited for all of your new books. It's gonna be great. But a lot of you, like all of you, are new authors, like relatively, especially because COVID made everything feel like we skipped a lot of time. And with COVID, a lot of people, including myself, picked up old projects or started new ones. So what is 1 or 2 pieces of advice that you would give to young authors who are considering self-publishing and or maybe just starting out?
I love this question. And there's always so much that I want to like say, even though I'm also brand new to this space myself. But I would say that if you're jumping into, I'm going to go from the business side of it because that's a side that I know really well. If you're jumping into self-publishing for the first time, really think about where you want to take that and how you want that to look for yourself so that you can understand how you want to structure like your business for this, your brand, the way that you're going to kind of write your books and stuff. If it's for fun and more almost like a hobby, you just want to be able to tell the stories and put them out there. Or is it more like you want to build a business off of this? You want this to be your full-time job? Those are things to really consider. And I think that as creatives, we often just like jump into the mix of things and we're like, I just want to write the stories and they will come. And like, it's just not the way it works, especially in like indie publishing. So I would really suggest that my top thing would be to think about it as a business and think about it how you want that business to look. And it can look however you want it to look. There is no structure to that. You get to do it the way you want to. That's the beautiful part of self-publishing. But do consider that, yes, you're a creative, but you're also running a business when you write and publish a book. So how do you want that to look? That would be my number one thing to like think about and get started with.
I love that, Brianne. And actually mine dovetails kind of perfectly with that because I agree that, thinking about it as a business and thinking about like, how am I going to pull together a budget, to pay for the things I need, like, editors and, cover artists and that kind of thing. But also realizing that you don't have to get it right with your first book or even your first like couple books. Self-publishing is hard, but in a way it can be a very forgiving business because it's never too late to sort of hit your stride, and then the books that you've already done, they become your backlist, and as you continue to grow and learn and get new readers, they'll go back and find those stories that you already published that meant a lot to you. So just I tell this to all the self-published authors or people who I talk to who are considering self-publishing, is like, don't wait until you think everything will be perfect to start or to take those first couple steps, because you can fail forward and turn your failures into learning experiences and get better and better as you go along.
We didn't plan this, but mine kind of segues really well off of Renee's, which is make sure to do your research in the preliminary stages. Make sure you're not just listening to like one indie author's experience, learn about many different ones and see the different ways that they have published their books, and not just, what cover designer did they use, what editor did they use. Don't be afraid to research into the different steps that they took, the different processes, because one of the best things about indie publishing is that you can choose the process in how you publish it. There aren't these like set steps, and you can decide what you're comfortable with, but it's really good to get an idea of the different ways and then kind of morph it and customize it to what you're comfortable with. I look back and wish I had done more research because, like Renee said, I made mistakes when it came to publishing Maiden. And then what Brianne said, that did affect my bottom line and it affected the business. So just do your research. And really, when it comes to the indie author community, it never hurts to message us. Worst comes to worst, we don't answer, but most of the indie authors I've met were very open to talking about our experience and talking one-on-one and answering questions. So.
I just want to add that is literally how I got like so friendly with all of you, because I would just like Renee can attest to this. I have been texting her nonstop. And like seriously though, like I wrote a review because one of my friends at the bookstore recommended it for Katharine's book, and she posts on her Instagram, and that was like I couldn't even go to sleep that night because I was so excited. And now here I am moderating a panel where she's talking. It's like so much has happened in like a few months. Gonna put a hold on my fangirling. So since all of you are fantasy authors, So how does the real world influence the messages of your stories?
I feel like, how does the real world not influence? No, for real though, it's such a good question, because I can speak particularly from my story, my experiences, that I really wanted to infuse, honestly, some of my own real world experiences into my stories. That was really important to me. And so I took personal experience, personal story, and I infused it into the books that I'm currently writing. And I don't think that it would have been possible for me to even really write these stories without that, to be frank, just because it's not only was it so important to me to like want to tell, about some of this kind of trauma related stuff and whatever, but also just real world things that you can't really, for me at least, get away from it. Like it sort of just comes out in my writing anyway, but I appreciate that. And I appreciate that I can talk about hard things in a fantasy world and in a fantasy environment, and have it be something that has like a beautiful message still behind it, and it's not like hit you over the head with a hammer type of a thing. And I just really, I really love that. So yeah, Renee, I know you're like sitting there agreeing with me. Anyway.
Yeah, I do agree, Brianne. I feel like I talked about this a little bit when introducing Star Chaser, but for me, even though it is epic high fantasy, a lot of the sub conflicts and even some of the overarching conflicts in the story, for me, they're how I process through things. I a lot of times get too much in my head to see around problems in my own life and in my interpersonal relationships, or things that I learn about, the history of my faith and things like that. And when all of that bubbles up and I don't know how to approach it, I'll take my characters and put them in that situation and see, like, it's almost like a trial and error. How do they walk through it? What are the consequences of approaching something this way or that way? And so I would say, Brianne, honestly, that was the perfect way to say it. How can it not? It's almost like we're giving ourselves therapy through our stories. I feel like in a lot of ways, it's how we're processing through the big things that we see around us and that are going on inside of us that are too big for us to figure out just in the real world itself, where we're constantly bombarded with them. So it's almost like an opportunity, I guess, to slow down and address these things at a more leisurely pace. And so I think that for me, that's really how it all comes into my stories, is just me trying to process real world events, real world struggles, things that are going on in my personal life.
I very much agree with both what Renee and Brianne said. I'll just kind of add on that for me, I think that the best fantasy novels, even with crazy ones with fairies and assassins and just cabals and everything that's in our novels, the best fantasy novels have some type of reality infused in them, because that's how our readers can connect to the story, is if they feel like they can relate. And although I have plenty of books behind me and on this other shelf over here that I loved growing up and when I was a teenager and in my early 20s, when I look back on them, I go, there were some things that I wish would have been added in so that I could have related better to them. And I want to infuse that in. So it is really funny when Renee said things about, like, I put my characters through some of the things that I go through. Because you made comments in reading my most recent book, literally, of like, Katie, I think you're talking about yourself. You pretty much wrote that sentence multiple times. But it just, for me, it allows not only myself to process things and connect with my own story, but I hope that it helps my readers connect with the story as well and have that form of escapism that I loved having when I was growing up and still do to this day.
That is very true. I definitely agree with everything you guys just said, but this isn't about me. So do you think that working with other authors on their projects, like CPing or just like doing like a joint project, has helped your stories reach their full potential?
Oh my gosh, yes. Like what? Yes, 100%. This to me feels like I could not have written already the 2 books that I've written without the help of other authors in my life, editors, like Cassidy, who I know is in the comments here, but like there's just no way. There's absolutely no way I could do it without them. Katharine is my critique partner, actually, right here, because she's amazing. But it's like the comments that we get and the way that we can uplift each other and we can help each other and we can like speak to each other's stories is, I don't even like it is. Ladies, is there a word for this? It is needed. It is perfect. It is, I can't live without it. So like, let's just say all of those things.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love this question. I think that for a long time I've been writing since I was very young, and I've been writing very seriously since about 2012, but I don't think I would have ever gotten where I am with being published if not for actually having people come alongside me on the journey, which was something that, aside from my family, my immediate family reading my books, I didn't have that until just recent years. And my critique partner, Cassidy Clark, is down in the comments. I'm constantly firing things off to her throughout the day, snapshots of my books, things like that, because I think that because we pour so much of ourselves into these books, it can be really hard to see where they can improve, because it's so raw and it's so real. It's almost like asking you like, okay, which part of your body do you want to cut off because it's necessary? And it's like, I don't know. How am I supposed to answer that? But somebody else can look and say, well, this is a superfluous part of your book. Maybe this can be said in a better way. And sometimes we're just so close to the project that we can't see that. So honestly, I think having critique partners and editors and stuff it's like the heartbeat of what we do, because it's those people who help us to see what our project could be. It's almost, I'm gonna take probably more time than I should, but I read a quote by Michelangelo that was like, I saw the carving in the marble and I brought it out, something to that effect. And I think that's kind of what critique partners and editors do, is they see the masterpiece in the marble and they help us bring it out. So
yeah, I couldn't do it without the little tribe I put together. I mean, I'm in this conversation with my 2 critique partners for my current project, and I could not be doing this without them. Even, yes, like when they go through your manuscript, and as Renee said, they're helping you see the things that like you did not see. And really, I do struggle with that. No matter how many times I can read my book, sometimes I really need people to be like, no, you need to do this, or maybe you should do this. But I also think that it's just good to have those people behind the scenes who know these things, so that when you're not ready to announce certain things, but things are being developed, like for Midnight Maiden and Midnight Revenge, I shared the covers with Renee like while they were in progress, because like I had to share them with someone. And I loved having someone to be able to share, like I didn't have to keep it in. So just even with those little moments that you could say are inconsequential when it like boiling it down to a more business technical side of things, but did it bring me joy in the process? Yes. And so for me, that just makes it so much better.
it brought me joy too.
Yeah, I just want to say that I think that collaboration is such a big part of the process that people overlook a lot of the time. That they're like, oh, I'm an author, I can do this all by myself. Really can't. And I mean, I learned that with my gorgeous CP Renee. She had so many comments for my book that I'm so excited to go back and edit. But Brianne, time for a very specific question. So your books deal with a lot of tough topics like PTSD, manipulation, abuse. How would you mind sharing any advice on how to walk the line between keeping it realistic but not overpowering?
Yes. Oh man, it's such a good question. And I would say it's almost a difficult question to like really kind of get to the heart of it. But I will admit that you gave me this question ahead of time and I did have time to think about it. So my answer today, I hope, is going to be really helpful, because I basically took my story and sort of like reverse engineered it to figure out how did I make it so that we could kind of like toe the line a little bit, but not make it overwhelming, but still talk about stuff that was really hard. And I have even, I would say at least one pretty graphic abuse scene in my very first book. And I really wanted to have that in there, like Katharine talked about in the very beginning too, kind of that freedom of getting to put some stuff in your books that maybe wouldn't have been accepted traditionally, but I feel are really needed. So I will start by saying that that's something that I was truly lacking in books personally when I was reading. And so that's one of the reasons I wanted it. I have domestic violence in my past, and I wanted to be able to like see that on the page, relate to it, but also heal from it. So this is where I'll get to like the question for real. When I'm writing really hard topics, especially something that's like a really, really tough scene where I'm getting a bit more graphic and it's, you know, that could be really, really hard to read. I think of it like this, that there needs to be hope. So the scene beforehand is basically setting up the whole thing for me, where you've got some hopeful stuff that's happening. A new person has entered into my MC's life, main character's life. And he's seeing issues in her world and thinking, I need to get her out of this. And that immediately sets us up for a hopeful thing. And then I have my traumatic kind of graphic abuse scene that happens. And I allow that to just sort of take place. I show all of the emotions that are going through my MC's mind during that time. And I think that's also something that's really important, is to incredibly showcase the emotions that are happening and allow you to like be in the mind of the person. But then afterward, I make sure that there's time to rest and heal and process what just happened. And that's another thing that I feel really misses the case in a lot of books that I've read, where you put your MC through like crazy stuff, and like she, you know, she, in my opinion, because that's who I'm writing right now, but like she needs some time to like process what just happened to her, right? And I feel like we lack that so often in a lot of the books that I read, and I'm kind of just like, I wanted to make sure that you had time to process this as the reader. So I take you through as the reader, you know, the hopeful, the traumatic, and then the process of it. And I realized that I did this subconsciously. I didn't like intentionally sit down and like write this out this way, but almost every time I've introduced something traumatic in my books, it has always been with the outline that there's hope always involved, no matter what. So the reader can always be hopeful and know that there's hope at the end of this very dark tunnel. But that also, you get the time to process with my MC. You get the time to be able, as the reader, to process at the same time as she is. And it was also incredibly cathartic for me, because I got to process too as I was writing it. And so all of those things I think are really important. I think that when you take two from real life examples, so whether or not you've been through traumatic things doesn't have to necessarily be the case, but you need to be able to describe the emotions of it. So take from any kind of like personal experience that maybe was whatever for you, and be able to like write out those emotions from your standpoint. And that also, I think, really helps it to not be incredibly overwhelming, because that's a ton of empathy that then is in that moment, right? So those are going to be the things I think that I can like sort of outline it in a way to give something tangible to when you talk about traumatic things, or, you know, have traumatic scenes, that basically you can make it so it doesn't overwhelm the reader, at least hopefully. I know that it could still be overwhelming depending on who you are, and that's okay. But that's the way that I have outlined it. And, you know, even if I didn't intend to, but thinking about it afterward, because this was such a good question for me, to figure out how I did that. But that to me, I think, is sort of my magical formula of how I made that happen in my books. So thank you for that question though, because that helped me a ton with my own writing process. I appreciated it.
So Renee, your turn. So you've been sharing some extremely helpful information regarding all things self-publishing and a sort of like that and how you navigate the world as an author, but also do balancing other jobs. But I was wondering if you could give like a rough step-by-step of how to get from that first draft to the physically published book.
I'd love to. It's a lot of steps. And again, I was happy I got to see this question a little bit early because it gave me a little time to condense. But basically the way that I do it, and it's different for everybody because everybody wants different things out of their process and has different ways that they have to approach things based on what they have to work with. But as a general rule, I usually I encourage writers to do like about 4 rounds of self edits. And so I encourage them to start with that. So you write your first draft, you take a little bit of time off, you get a little bit of distance from your book, whether that's a day, a week, however long you need, and then go ahead and do self edits and just check for typos, glaring, any glaring plot issues that you can see, things that you maybe thought about needing to change while you were drafting, and then syncing up with a critique partner or a developmental editor, or maybe both if you want to go that way, and getting somebody else's feedback like we were talking about earlier, getting fresh eyes on your project, having somebody tell you like, I think this really works and I think this needs work. And then once you get that, going ahead and incorporating those changes, their feedback, making the story a little bit more polished, things like that. And then I recommend after that going to beta readers because they're kind of like your test audience. And so if you're writing a young adult fantasy, you want to find beta readers who typically read young adult fantasy, and they give you another idea of like, as somebody who reads in this genre, I think this works for the genre you're writing in, but maybe this doesn't. Like maybe this is a little too graphic, maybe this is a little too much of this or that. And they will give you kind of a rounded idea of how your book is going to be received by that audience. So then you can go back and do another round of self edits and incorporate that feedback, at which point you'll probably have a clean-ish draft. You'll have, gone through, polished things up, read over it for yourself, gotten a lot of the typos and grammar stuff taken care of. So then you can send it to a copy line editor, at which point they will help you to get it even more tightened up, like working with your phrasing, working with how you present ideas, helping you look for more typos and grammar things, because we all have those stubborn typos that are going to make it through every single round of editing. So your copy line editor helps you with that. And then you can do another round of self edits and incorporate their changes. And so from a writing standpoint, those are kind of the steps. And then as you're going through that and you're laying out sort of a timeline of, okay, I want to be published by, let's say, October, and it's January now, then you need to think about during that process, some of the hurry up and wait time that Brianne and I were talking about before the panel started was, you can use that wait time to start getting other things together, like reaching out to a cover artist, reaching out to a map maker, getting commissioning things like fan art if you want to have like art for bookmarks or giveaways, things like that. And behind the scenes, there's a lot of things that have to happen, like purchasing an ISBN or an ISBN pack if you want to save a little money in the long run, figuring out if you're going to hire a formatter, needing to, hunt somebody down for that, or teaching yourself how to format if you want to save a buck there. So a lot of it is within that timeline of, getting edits and then incorporating edits, and getting feedback and incorporating feedback, working in those other things that have to happen in order for a book to come together. So hopefully that makes sense.
Thank you so much for that. It's very helpful. So Katharine, finally your turn. You help indie authors navigate the world of social media through the Sapphire Inc press, which is amazing. I love it. And could you tell me like a little bit about what it's like and what exactly you do?
Yeah, so I actually started Sapphire Inc Press now almost exactly a year ago. I launched my website and opened myself up to events I think on January 21st. So we're like coming up on the 1-year anniversary of opening Sapphire Inc. So Sapphire Inc. was my way of not only being able to give back to the indie community, because I love this community and I love how they've helped me, and I wanted to be able to help others in return. From a business standpoint, it was a way of me being able to supplement my writing and to be able to put more revenue into my business, but also being able to use the degree that I got. I actually have a degree in hospitality and business management and culinary and baking arts, and I don't use it anymore. I left that industry. But I have a history in event planning, and I took my experience in event planning and I took my experience as an indie author, and I created Sapphire Inc. Press and Events, which does digital, mostly on Instagram, events that you would most likely need primarily for the release of your book, but also just the promotion of your book. So we do virtual book tours, we do virtual cover reveals, release day celebrations. I have everything from a la carte packages of just being able to do a 1-day blast of your book on the cover reveal day or the release day. And then I also have packages that build everything together and allows you to have some big celebration. And the primary reason that I created this business was because this is a really important step as an indie author. You need to find a way to market your book. And one of the really most accessible ways is through social media. And I loved being able to learn about it and discover it, but I came to the conclusion that there are a lot of authors out there who just don't have the time or the availability or really just the patience to be able to organize these events, and I did. And there were plenty of other companies out there, but what I really wanted to do was to make a personalized and customizable experience at a reasonable price, because again, as an indie author, I know it's expensive to self-publish a book and you really want to make it as cheap as possible. And when I was seeing some of these tour companies charging certain amounts of money, I wanted to be able to make it much more accessible to those authors who I know struggle to be able to even put out the book, let alone market the book. So it was a combination of all of those things. I love my business. I have actually been able to work with both Renee and Brianne on some of their releases. And in the past year, it has grown a lot quicker than I expected. And even these first couple months of my year are really busy with events. And I love every minute of it. And I really hope to gain more authors and to be able to help with more releases over the next year and many years to come.
I'm so happy about that. So I think that right now we're going to jump into some of the fan questions. So the first one, I'm just going in order of when they were asked. Cassidy asks, which part of writing your stories has been the toughest to master for each of you?
Ooh. Which part has been the toughest? Oh man, I think, this is such a hard question, Cassidy. Of course you would ask that. But I think for me, the toughest part about writing the stories is a little bit like what Renee, Katharine, and I were just talking about with getting other people involved. It's so easy to kind of get sucked into your own world, to not really necessarily, be able to see that 50,000 foot view, yourself. And so I think for me, having people come in and be able to look at my story and tell me where it's lacking has probably been the best thing ever, because I really struggle with seeing it myself. Like I just, where it might slow down a little bit or like go too fast or, any of the pacing issues, or maybe I'm just not conveying a character quite right or something like that. So I'm going to say that, but I feel like that was really vague. So perhaps the other girls will have even better answers than I do right now.
Oh gosh, I'm just rereading the question over and over because I feel like every bit of writing I feel like I've fought for to become able to say like I think I'm good at writing dialogue or whatever. But I think the hardest part for me actually to master with writing has been the pause. um which by that I mean, I'll give just like an example. When I was first drafting my book Lightfall, I knew that my main character Sistine had a lot that she needed to go through and process, kind of like Brianne was talking about. She had a lot of trauma to process, and I wanted to do it justice, but because of things that were going on in my personal life, I was very burned out, and didn't think I could pause, so I rushed through writing it. And it was a huge lesson for me that if I write burned out and I write high level emotion, like instead of going deep with the character and really sitting in like what they're going through, I'm not doing justice to the character, and I'm not doing justice to the reader, especially those kinds of readers, like Brianne was saying, who are looking for themselves on the page and kind of looking to see their story reflected through the character's eyes. So I think the hardest thing that I'm really still learning in writing is just to be willing to pause and sit in uncomfortable emotions and hard parts of a book, and be willing to feel what needs to be felt to put the best story forward.
My answer is going to be pretty specific, and this is just me looking back at publishing Midnight Maiden and Midnight Revenge. I had a really hard time balancing how much to put in the book, because with Midnight Maiden, I had beta readers and critique partners be like, there's not enough in this story. We want to learn more about this and this. Because like I would mention and not actually divulge detail into certain things. And so I was like, oh, so I added like, I want to say like 45,000 words to my manuscript after beta readers, because they kept saying like, why didn't we get to see this? Why didn't we get to see this? I want to see this. And then that happened. And then I went into writing Revenge, and I was convinced I had to put everything in the book. And then people were reading it and they were like, no, there's a lot going on right now. And then I had to take stuff out and refocus. And so for me, a big part was learning to balance. I will say I've gotten better at it, but that was something that always made me laugh when I look back on how for the same series, I went from one extreme to the exact opposite in the span of one book. So that's my answer, because it's funny.
Okay, we have 9 minutes left, just a time check for everyone. Let's get back to more fan questions. There was one in the chat. How do you find your tribe, like editor and CP, especially when you're dealing with a project that's so close to your heart?
For me, it was, I was already reaching out and seeking out people on specifically social media, because that's probably one of the quickest and easiest ways to find people right away. I spend my time on Instagram. That's where I met all of these amazing women who are on screen with me right now. But I would say that that's kind of where I started. I would look to others who were also indie authors. Often I would read their books, and then I would reach out and be like, you're amazing. Can you talk to me? And it was sort of one of those things for me where like, don't be afraid to tell someone that you love their work if they're already doing it. And literally just like reach out and be like, can we talk more about it? Or something, or, kind of whatever it might need to be. For Katharine and I to become even critique partners, it was sort of just a very natural thing that happened. We just started talking about her books, and then my books, and then all the other books that we were reading. And then eventually we're like, hey, do you want to help each other? We're like, yes. So to me, it's building relationships, but it's also like, don't be afraid to reach out to people, whether you're both just writing at the same time, whether someone's already written before you and you really just love their work and you want to talk to them about it, but like, reach out. The whole point of social media is to be social. And sometimes I feel we might forget that. But let's get back to that. If you're looking for your tribe, literally look for your tribe, like go talk to people that you would love to be part of your tribe. And honestly, they will come. that will happen.
Yeah, I agree. And I just wanted to add, I think it was Shirley who asked that question, and just going to put this out there, Shirley, I actually have a post that I did recently in my coaching series on how to become a critique partner, which I think Brianne gave a great summary of it. It's just kind of getting out there, putting yourself out there, and interacting with people. Editors can be a little bit easier because they're usually a specific person who's offering a specific service. So if you follow some people and do a little bit of networking, editors can be easier to find because you just kind of have to find one that's in your price range and then see what their availability is.
And I just wanted to add, for like the editor and more technical side of things, when you're hiring a service, for my first book, I went through a website called reedsy.com, which is a way to be able to, as an author, find freelance work. But the other thing that I'd probably suggest, this is how I found my map designer. If you are reading indie books, most of us put the cover designer, our editors, all of the different services that we hired, we tend to put them in either the front part of the book where, like the copyright pages. And then typically, because most of us just like gushing about the people that helped us, if you go to the acknowledgements as well, you can sometimes find names there. So sometimes that's just an easier way. Like if you have seen my covers or Brianne's or Renee's and you're like, oh my gosh, I love this artist, just go in there, look, see what name is there, and then go to Instagram or Google. That's actually a really quick way. It's sitting right on your bookshelf.
Okay, next question. Adriana, I hope I'm saying that right, says, hello, I'm a young writer and I was just wondering, well, how do you start off? Did you have many readers? And if you didn't, how did you get there? How did you find a cover artist and a publisher willing to take it and send it out?
Whew, okay, so answering, let's see, I think the first part of that, of like, how did you start off? I'm reading it again just so I can make sure. Did you have any readers and how did you kind of get there? So I'm going to answer that one real fast to sort of get started. But for me, I just jumped into writing. I'll be totally honest with you. I had already been amassing a following of people through my different entrepreneurial ventures, shall I say. So I already had a following on Instagram, which did really help. But if you did not have that, what I will say is jump in and literally tell everybody, tell the entire world you're writing a book. Like, do not be shy about it. There's nothing to be shy about. You're writing a book. That's amazing. Like, literally tell the world. I want you to shout it from rooftops, tell every single family, friend, coworker. Like, I want you to tell absolutely everybody. That's how you find readers. Literally. That's like, if you don't have any following whatsoever yet, like that's how you do it. You literally just talk about it all the time. Make sure that not one person in your world does not know you are writing a book. And then I think part two of that is, how did you find the cover artist and publisher? I actually think that Katharine just kind of gave the answer to that. I found my cover designer literally by looking inside of the book, somebody else's book, and I was like, I love her cover. Who's her cover designer? Went, looked it up, found her online. So that's one of the things there. And then as far as publishers, I'm an indie published person, so I published it myself and Amazon took care of the rest. So that's as far as that goes. But I'm going to turn it over because I know these ladies have other things to say.
Actually, I think that's a really great summary, Brianne. And I would say, I've been writing basically my whole life. But in terms of getting readers, when I put the Chaos Circus out there in 2019, I had basically nobody. I had my family, and I did what Brianne said. I posted about it all over, Instagram and Twitter and Facebook. And, I made a big honking deal out of it. And then the wonderful thing is that, when you write a book and people read that, and then you write something else, a lot of those people want to read that too. And it just kind of snowballs from there. And then I really don't have anything to add on the cover artist or publisher thing. Again, being an indie author, same thing with me. I went through Ingram Spark, which is a different printing company than Amazon, but they handle all of it. They do the printing and all that good stuff. So, yep.
They answered the question. There's that. That's the answer. Listen to them.
Okay, so I don't think we have time for one more like in-depth question, but Cassidy did ask for a book recommendation from each of you, so I don't you guys give that.
I feel like I need specifics, Cassidy. What kind of book are you looking for? Honestly, though, if Cassidy hadn't been the one to ask this question, I would be recommending her book. I would say if you have not read The Saltwater Air by Cassidy Clark, please go read it. There are so many books that I love and so many amazing authors out there that it would be really difficult for me to give a specific book recommendation of anybody. But I would say if you have not read any of these ladies who are currently here, go read any of our books because they're all wonderful. So that's my book recommendation. Cassidy, if you want specifics, you gotta get specific, girl. I gotta have some parameters.
So I'm gonna have to second that as well. I highly recommend Cassidy's debut novel, The Saltwater Air, and its sequels. I've currently read the first one, the second one, because I have CP and editorial powers, and also she is sending me snippets of the third one, and I'm dying. But also obviously the books of these lovely ladies here on the panel with me, and that includes Lucy, by the way. I just had the privilege of CPing her book, and it's absolutely wonderful, and I'm really excited for that one. But also I am currently obsessed with the fate of, I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce it right, The Fate of Aranthea series by Heather Frost, also an indie author. Though it's one of those book series that I am constantly reading when I should be going to bed. So I highly recommend it if you're a fan of fantasy.
And the book that this is the one that kind of came to mind for me with an indie. This is a YA paranormal romance book. It's called Blue Moon Eyes, and it's from a friend of mine named Leah Copeland. I loved it. The second book comes out on the 8th, February 8th. And this is also a book that I've been helping with through Sapphire Inc. So I really suggest that if you love shifter romance, it's a good one.
All right, I don't know, Cassie, if your question was also referring to me, but I'll give a book recommendation because anyone who follows me on Instagram right now knows that it is my mission to convert everyone that I know to this one author that is the reason that I'm writing my book, because she made me fall in love with fairy tale retellings. I accidentally read the 8th book in the series before I read any of the others. But the first book is called The Healer's Apprentice by Melanie Dickerson. My favorite is The Captive Maiden. It's a Cinderella retelling, probably where I got my obsessive love for Brianne's book. But that is my recommendation. And with that, I don't want to take all of your time tonight. So I will wrap this up and say thank you so much, you guys, for agreeing to do this crazy idea of mine. And thank you all so much for coming. I had a really fun time. I know I learned so much for my journey, and I hope you guys did too. Thank you all so much.
Thank you for having us, Lucy. Anytime you want to do something like this, hit me up.
Yes, this was fun.
Yes, and I'll just say from Cary Library, thank you all for coming. And Lucy, thank you for making it happen. You did a really great job, and you're a force to be reckoned with. That's for darn sure, and that's a great thing.
Truth.
So thanks to all, and I hope that we see you on Zoom again sometime. This was really fun.
It would be our pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. Thanks to everyone for coming.
Thank you, everyone. Have a great night.